They say a hoodie can hide who you are, but sometimes it reveals everything they refuse to see. Malik Rhodes wasn't looking for trouble that day. 16 years old, black, hardworking, wearing nothing but an open hoodie, a clean polo shirt underneath, and the dreams of giving his little sister a perfect birthday. But in a town like Brentwood, appearances were everything. And to some people, seeing a black boy with a hoodie meant only one thing. The moment Malik stepped into Harrington Jewelers clutching months of hard-earned savings, the room shifted. Whispers sharpened, suspicion thickened, and when a bracelet slipped from his hands, the world didn't see an accident. They saw a criminal. In seconds, the cuffs were on, the cameras were rolling, and the story they wanted to tell about Malik was already spreading like wildfire. But what they didn't know was this: Malik wasn't alone. He had someone watching, someone powerful, someone who had fought too long and too hard to let another black boy's story be written by fear. Today, Malik's hoodie wasn't just cloth and cotton. It was armor. It was history. It was a silent declaration. You will not erase me. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Brentwood looked like a postcard that had come to life. Wide sidewalks gleamed under the afternoon sun. Storefronts boasted names like Harrington, Alcott, and Windsor and Sons. Luxury SUVs idled at every corner, drivers tapping their steering wheels impatiently as women in designer sunglasses strolled past with shopping bags swinging from manicured fingers. And then, through it all, moved Malik Rhodes. He was a shadow against the shine, 16 years old, 6 feet tall, leaning slightly forward under the weight of a worn backpack in a black hoodie that hung loose from his shoulders, his sneakers scuffed, the soles barely clinging to life after too many double shifts at Joe's coffee house. Most people didn't notice Malik, or if they did, they noticed the hoodie first, not the open smile tucked under it, not the careful, deliberate steps, not the stack of crumpled cash stuffed into his wallet, each bill representing an hour of grinding work and aching feet. Just the hoodie, just the color of his skin. Malik was used to it. He had learned early that in places like Brentwood, a hoodie on a black boy was a warning sign, not a garment, not a choice, a signal. Still, he had a mission today, and he was not about to let the world get in his way. His little sister Kira was turning 11. Bright-eyed, messy-haired, always running barefoot through the apartment yelling about astronauts and dragons. She had been asking for a charm bracelet since January, ever since spotting one in a glossy magazine. Malik had promised her, and Malik never broke a promise. So, he had saved, one tip jar dollar at a time, one late-night closing shift after another. Today was the day. Today he would walk into Harrington Jewelers, buy that bracelet, and watch Kira's eyes light up like it was Christmas and her birthday rolled into one. He checked his wallet again, fingers brushing the worn leather for reassurance. The bills were there, neat, precious. His heart pounded as he crossed the street toward the store. The front of Harrington's gleamed like something out of a movie. Tall glass windows, gold lettering. Inside, everything sparkled under white-hot lights diamonds. Silver, watches worth more than Malik's entire life savings. He paused outside the door. In the reflection, he caught sight of himself. The hoodie, the sneakers, the worn jeans. For a second, his hand hovered over his zipper. Should he take it off? Would it make a difference? He thought of his mom's voice in his head, calm and firm. Walk in proud. Baby, you got nothing to prove. Malik straightened his shoulders, adjusted his backpack, and pushed open the heavy glass door. The bell above chimed, sharp and bright. Inside, the air was cool, heavy with the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume. Velvet-lined cases lined the walls, each one housing jewelry that shimmered like captured stars. A few customers turned to glance at him. A woman in a sharp navy dress clutched her purse a little closer. An older man adjusted his glasses, frowning, and behind the counter stood Claudia Remington. Platinum blonde hair, pearl earrings, manicured nails tapping against the glass. Her eyes landed on Malik, and in that instant, he felt it. The shift, the suspicion, like a door quietly sliding shut. Claudia smiled tightly. It wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile people give before they ask if you're lost. Malik swallowed hard, forcing himself to smile back. "Hi," he said, voice steady. "I'd like to see the silver charm bracelets." "Please." Claudia didn't move. Her arms stayed crossed, her eyes cool and assessing. "Those are quite expensive," she said. Malik nodded, already pulling out his wallet, flashing the neat stack of cash inside. "I know. I'm ready." Still, she hesitated. Still, the air felt thick. Malik stood there, waiting, the seconds stretching out longer than they had any right to. Finally, Claudia sighed as if he had asked her to lift a mountain. "This way," she said. Malik followed her to a small case near the center of the store. Inside, nestled on black velvet, were rows of delicate bracelets. Tiny silver charms dangled from thin chains. Stars, hearts, little lockets. He spotted the one immediately, the same one from the magazine, a tiny astronaut charm dangling beside a crescent moon. "Perfect for Kira. That one." "Please," Malik said, pointing. Claudia hesitated again, then slowly opened the case, pulling out the tray with 2 fingers, as if afraid it might bite her. "Be careful," she said sharply. "It's worth more than your weekly paycheck." The words stung more than Malik wanted to admit. He forced a smile, willing himself not to react. He reached out, fingers brushing the bracelet. It was even more beautiful up close, the charms delicate and bright under the lights. Malik's hand trembled slightly. The bracelet slipped. Time seemed to slow. The bracelet tumbled from his fingers, bouncing off the glass with a soft clink before falling onto the floor. And that was all it took. The sound of the bracelet hitting the floor echoed louder than it should have. Malik froze. Every muscle in his body stiffened. He instinctively bent down to pick it up, his movements careful, deliberate, but he didn't get the chance. Claudia gasped loud. Theatrical, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "Oh my God," she shrieked, stepping back as if Malik had pulled a weapon instead of a bracelet. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. A ripple of uneasy tension spread through the store like a slow-moving wave. "He's trying to steal it!" Claudia's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "He dropped it to hide it. I saw it." Malik's heart slammed against his ribs. "No, he started." But his voice felt too small, too easy to drown under Claudia's manufactured panic. The older man with the glasses narrowed his eyes. The woman with the navy dress clutched her bag tighter. The air thickened with something worse than suspicion now. Fear. Claudia grabbed the phone behind the counter, her fingers flying over the keypad. "Security," she barked into the receiver. "Get the police here immediately. We have an attempted theft. Young black male, hoodie, dangerous." Malik stood frozen, every nerve in his body screaming at him to move, to explain, to run. But he knew better. Running would be worse. Running would be proof. Instead, he lifted his hands slowly, palms facing out. "I didn't steal anything," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Steady. No one listened. The front door swung open so hard it slammed against the wall. 2 uniformed officers burst inside, hands already hovering over their holsters. The sight of them made Malik's throat close up. One officer, a stocky man with a shaved head, pointed straight at Malik. On the ground, he barked. Malik hesitated for a half-second too long. It was all the excuse they needed. The other officer lunged forward, grabbing Malik's arm. twisting it behind his back. Pain exploded through Malik's shoulder as the cuffs clamped down hard against his wrists. He barely had time to cry out before he was shoved roughly against the glass counter. The bracelet he had dropped lay just inches from his face, still glittering innocently on the floor. Outside the store window, a small crowd had gathered. Phones were up, filming. Whispers floated through the air. Another one, probably stealing. Should have known better. The stocky officer yanked Malik upright and marched him toward the door. The look on Claudia's face as he passed her wasn't relief, it was satisfaction. Malik bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. Not because he was angry, not yet, but because he knew how dangerous anger could be right now. The officers shoved him onto the sidewalk, forcing him down onto his knees beside a patrol car. Cars slowed. Pedestrians stared. Some took pictures. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to scream. Instead, Malik kept his head down, breathing slowly through his nose the way his mom had taught him. One of the officers stood behind him, one hand resting casually on the butt of his gun. "You have the right to remain silent," he began, voice bored, detached. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Malik barely heard the rest. His mind buzzed, adrenaline roaring in his ears. He could see his own reflection in the polished door of the patrol car, the hoodie, the cuffs, the look of someone who had already been judged and sentenced without a trial, and all because of a bracelet, all because of a moment, all because of a hoodie. The store manager, a balding man in a navy suit, stepped out of Harrington's, wringing his hands nervously. Officers," he said, voice dropping low. "You might want to call it in. The kid's not just any troublemaker." The officers exchanged a glance. "What do you mean?" before the manager could answer. The screech of tires cut through the thick, heavy afternoon air. A black Cadillac pulled up hard against the curb. The back door swung open with precision, and out stepped a woman in a sharp black suit, her ID badge already flashing in her hand like a blade catching the light. Malik's heart leapt into his throat. Mom, Serena Rhodes, special agent in charge, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the nightmare that was about to crash down on this place like a thunderstorm. The moment Serena Rhodes stepped onto the sidewalk, the air shifted, not because she raised her voice, not because she stormed in, waving her badge like a weapon. No, Serena didn't need to shout to command a room. She simply existed, solid, steady, inevitable. The stocky officer straightened up immediately, eyes flickering from her face to the badge clipped to her blazer. His partner shifted awkwardly, glancing back at Malik like he was just realizing he might have made a very big mistake. "Is there a problem here?" "Officers," Serena's voice was calm, even, but it carried the weight of someone who was very used to getting answers. "Ma'am, this young man attempted theft." The first officer stammered, clearing his throat. "He, dropped merchandise. Store owner called it in." Serena didn't even blink. Instead, she took 2 deliberate steps closer to Malik, crouching slightly to meet his eyes. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly. "Just for him." Malik nodded once, the motion stiff from the pressure of the cuffs. Serena turned back to the officers, standing tall again. "My name is Special Agent Serena Rhodes, Federal Bureau of Investigation." She flipped her badge open fully now, holding it steady for them and for every bystander filming to see. "This boy you have in custody is Malik Rhodes," she continued, her voice growing colder, harder with each word, "and he is being unlawfully detained without evidence. Probable cause, or Miranda rights properly administered." The younger officer, the one who had cuffed Malik, shifted uncomfortably. Serena didn't give him a chance to interrupt. "I suggest," she said, her voice slicing clean through the tension, "you review the security footage inside Harrington Jewelers immediately." The officers hesitated, Serena arched one eyebrow. A small, deadly gesture. Unless you would prefer I make a formal complaint to your supervisor, she added. And the Civil Rights Division? The stocky officer's face turned a deep shade of red. Without a word, he reached down and quickly unlocked the cuffs around Malik's wrists. Malik rubbed his wrists, the metal having left faint red marks against his skin. He kept his head down, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw the onlookers' faces shift. Some looked guilty, some looked relieved to be spectators, not participants. Some just looked away, cowards. The store manager bustled over, sweating profusely. There's been a misunderstanding. Agent Rhodes. He babbled. I'm sure we can resolve this quietly. Serena didn't even glance at him. Where's the footage? She asked the officers. The younger one looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. We'll, we'll request access now, he mumbled, grabbing his radio. The footage came quickly after that. Inside the store, everyone watched the small monitor mounted above the cash register. They saw Malik point politely to the case. They saw Claudia hesitate, then slowly hand over the tray. They saw Malik pick up the bracelet and drop it by accident. No pockets. No attempt to conceal. No theft. Just a clumsy moment. Just a boy trying to buy a gift for his sister. Silence stretched long and heavy after the footage ended. The stocky officer cleared his throat. Looks like no crime was committed, he said awkwardly. Serena gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. You think she said dryly? She turned toward Claudia Remington, who was hovering behind the counter, her face pale as porcelain. And you, Serena said, her voice still deceptively calm, I suggest you think very carefully about what you say next, because filing a false report is a criminal offense. Claudia opened her mouth, then shut it again. Serena stepped closer to the counter, lowering her voice to a sharp whisper only Claudia could hear. You saw a hoodie, she said. You saw skin, and you decided you knew the whole story. Claudia's hands trembled where they rested on the glass. Serena straightened up, adjusting the lapels of her blazer with deliberate care. We're done here, she said aloud. Turning back toward Malik, she extended her hand. Palm up. Come on, baby, let's go. Malik stood slowly, still feeling the eyes on him, still feeling the heat of humiliation burning under his skin. But when he placed his hand in his mother's, something shifted. The shame didn't belong to him anymore. It never had. As they turned to leave, Malik caught one last glimpse of the store through the reflection on the glass door. Not just the jewelry, not just the polished counters and bright lights, but the cracks beneath it all. The fear, the prejudice, the rotted foundation nobody ever wanted to admit was there. He pulled his hoodie up over his head as he stepped outside, not to hide, but to remind them, to remind himself. This hoodie was not a threat, it was a story. And it was just getting started. The next morning, Brentwood looked the same. Coffee shops humming with quiet conversations, SUVs rolling down clean streets, smiles flashed across expensive suits and polished loafers. But for Malik Rhodes, everything felt different now. He sat at the kitchen table, stirring a bowl of oatmeal he wasn't really eating. His hoodie still hung over the back of his chair. The cuffs stretched from yesterday's rough treatment. The memory played over and over in his mind, the click of the cuffs, the stairs, the cold sidewalk pressing against his knees. You ready for today? Serena asked, her voice low but steady as she sipped her coffee. Malik shrugged. Same old, he said, though he didn't believe it. Serena leaned across the table, her dark eyes locking onto his. You walk in there with your head high, she said. You are not what they see. You are who you know you are. Malik nodded, tucking her words somewhere deep inside himself. Words were armor too, especially in a place like Brentwood High. The school building rose before him like a glass fortress, polished, gleaming, intimidating. Inside, It smelled of fresh paint and money, the kind of place where lineage mattered more than GPA, where kids didn't just inherit eye colors, they inherited power, last names that opened doors, last names that closed them just as fast. Malik adjusted his backpack and stepped through the doors. The hallway buzzed with energy. Groups of kids clustered at lockers, laughing too loudly, scrolling through phones, tossing books under their arms without a care in the world. Malik moved through them like a ghost, not invisible, just misread, always misread. He was halfway to his first class when he heard it. The first shot, a voice, light and mocking, floated from a group by the water fountains. "Hey, Hoodie boy, try not to steal anything today." "All right," snickers followed. High fives slapped palms. The laughter was sharp, cutting. Malik kept walking, didn't look back, didn't slow down. But inside, something coiled tight in his chest. The second shot came at lunch. Malik sat alone, as he usually did, picking at a sandwich he barely tasted. The cafeteria buzzed with noise trays clattering, voices rising and falling. The shrill laughter of kids who had never had to fight to be seen as human. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a group shifting toward him. At the center of it was Grant Whitmore, blonde hair, easy smirk, varsity jacket slung over one shoulder. Grant didn't need to be loud to be dangerous. He had the kind of power that came from generations of money and the reckless confidence of someone who had never been told no. Malik had seen him around, never spoken to him, never needed to. But today, Grant had decided Malik was worth noticing. Grant sauntered over, dropping into the seat across from Malik without an invitation. He leaned back, balancing his chair on two legs, arms crossed lazily. "Big day for you yesterday." "Huh," he said, voice loud enough to draw curious glances from the nearby tables. Malik said nothing. Grant grinned wider. "Saw the video." He continued, pulling out his phone and waving it in the air like a trophy. "Whole town saw it. Tough break. Man, I mean, you fit the description so well, couldn't blame them." "Right." Laughter rippled through Grant's little circle. Malik took a slow breath, kept his face blank. "Nothing funny about false arrests," he said quietly. Grant raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "False, man? Who said anything about false?" He leaned forward, elbows hitting the table with a loud smack. "You people always play the victim. Maybe if you didn't dress like a thug, nobody would think you were one." The words hit like punches. Malek felt his fists tighten under the table, felt the hot flush of humiliation crawl up his neck. But he remembered Serena's voice that morning. "You are not what they see." He picked up his tray calmly, stood, and walked away, leaving Grant's laughter echoing behind him. Malik didn't slam doors, didn't yell, didn't even text anyone about it. He just went to his next class, sat in his chair, pulled out his notebook, and got to work. Because that's what survival looked like sometimes. Not fighting, not shouting, just refusing to be broken. But Grant Whitmore wasn't used to being ignored. And people like Grant didn't like being ignored. For them, silence wasn't strength, it was defiance. And in Brentwood High, defiance demanded punishment. Malik didn't know it yet, but the real storm hadn't even started. Not by a long shot. By the time Malik made it to last period, the whispers had started, not loud, not obvious, but there, slithering through the halls like smoke under a door. Everywhere he turned, someone was leaning over to whisper behind a hand. Every glance lasted a little too long. Every laugh carried an edge. He tried to brush it off, focus on the board, focus on the assignment, focus on anything except the way the world felt like it was tilting sideways. But ignoring it didn't make it disappear. It never did. After the bell rang, Malik headed to his locker, moving quickly, head down. He didn't see the tripwire until it was too late. Someone he never even saw who had tied the straps of two backpacks together across the hallway. Low to the ground, Malik's foot caught hard. He stumbled forward, crashing into the lockers with a loud metallic bang. Laughter exploded around him, not the kind of laughter that you could mistake for anything else. It wasn't about a funny accident. It wasn't shared. It was directed at him. Malik pulled himself upright, wincing at the sharp pain blooming in his knee. He scanned the hallway. Grant stood about 20 feet away, surrounded by a loose circle of boys in varsity jackets. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His smirk said enough. Malik gritted his teeth. He could feel the weight of the stairs on his back, feel the burn of humiliation crawling under his skin. But he didn't react. Didn't give them the satisfaction. He just grabbed his backpack from the floor, slung it over one shoulder, and kept walking. Each step hurt a little more than the last. But Malik knew pain. He had carried worse than this, and he wasn't about to let Brentwood High see him bleed. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the parking lot. Malik headed toward the bus stop, his steps slow, deliberate. He wasn't 3 feet from the bench when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up beside him. The window slid down with a smooth whir. Grant sat behind the wheel, still wearing that same lazy grin. "You need a ride." "Hoodie boy," he called out. "Wouldn't want you stealing anything on the bus." More laughter from the passenger seat, one of Grant's friends. A wiry kid with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Malik didn't break stride, didn't glance at them, didn't even flinch. Grant leaned further out the window. "Come on, man, don't be shy. You're famous now. Whole town's talking about you." He held up his phone, waving it like a prize. Malik caught a glimpse of the screen. It was the video, the one from the jewelry store, clipped, edited, posted online. The caption read, "Another one caught stealing." Typical. Hundreds of comments scrolled underneath, some laughing, some worse. Malik felt something cold settle into the pit of his stomach. They weren't just whispering anymore. They were building a story he hadn't agreed to, a story he didn't deserve. And in Brentwood, once a story stuck, it was almost impossible to scrape off. Grant's voice dropped lower, more venomous now. "You should have stayed where you belong," he said. "You're not one of us." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who knew the system would always back him up. Malik stopped walking. For a heartbeat, the world went completely still. The sound of distant traffic, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the faint buzz of Grant's engine idling. All of it faded until there was nothing left but Malik, the burning in his chest, and the simple, terrible truth of what he was up against. He could have said something, could have thrown the words back at them like knives, but Serena's voice was there again, steady in his mind. "You are not what they see." Without a word, Malik turned his back on the Mercedes and kept walking, head high, shoulders square, step by step by step. Behind him, he heard the engine rev once. Frustrated, he didn't turn around, wouldn't give them the power, wouldn't give them anything. He just kept walking toward the bus stop, where an old battered bench waited for him under the bruised purple sky. Because sometimes survival wasn't loud. Sometimes it wasn't about fighting back. Sometimes survival was just moving forward, no matter how hard they tried to drag you down. And Malik Rhodes, he was getting good at surviving. Even if it meant walking alone, especially if it meant walking alone. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. Malik sat by the window, backpack clutched tightly against his chest, forehead leaning against the cool glass. Outside, Brentwood blurred past manicured lawns, iron fences, flower beds that looked like they had never known struggle. Inside, Malik's mind replayed every moment from the day, the tripwire, the cafeteria sneers. Grant's words cutting deeper than any shove or punch ever could. He stared at his reflection in the window, the hoodie, the tired eyes, The boy everybody thought they already knew. He looked dangerous to them, not because of anything he had done, but because he dared to exist in a place they didn't think he belonged. When Malik finally stepped off the bus, the streets were quiet. The sun had slipped behind the horizon, leaving the sky washed in soft purples and deep blues. He walked the few blocks to his apartment complex, sneakers scuffing the cracked sidewalk. Their building wasn't much peeling paint, flickering lights in the stairwell, but it was home. He climbed the steps slowly, every muscle in his body aching with a heaviness that had nothing to do with physical pain. When he reached the door, he paused, took a breath, straightened his hoodie, and walked in. Inside, Kira was sitting cross-legged on the couch, scribbling in a notebook, her tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. When she saw Malik, she lit up instantly. "Malik," she squealed, bounding over to hug him around the waist. He staggered slightly, the sudden contact shaking loose the cold armor he had wrapped around himself all day. He smiled a real one and ruffled her hair. "Hey, Space Cadet," he said, using her favorite nickname. Kira pulled back, beaming. "Did you get it? Did you find the bracelet?" Malik hesitated for half a second, not because he hadn't gotten it, but because now he wondered if giving it to her would be safe. Would she get whispers too? Would people look at her the way they looked at him? But then Kira looked up at him with those big brown eyes, full of hope and trust and love, and Malik knew some things were worth more than fear. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the small velvet box. Kira gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Malik flipped open the lid, revealing the silver bracelet, delicate and bright even in the dim apartment light. The tiny astronaut charm dangled from the chain, catching the glow like a shooting star. Kira's eyes filled with tears. "Malik," she whispered, "it's perfect." He knelt down, fastening it gently around her wrist. "It's for you," he said softly, "to remind you, no matter what, you can reach the stars." Kira threw her arms around his neck again, squeezing so tight it hurt, but Malik didn't mind, not one bit. Later that night, after Kira had gone to bed, Malik sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. The video was still spreading. More views, more comments, some anonymous, ugly words typed with casual cruelty, some from kids he recognized, kids he saw in the hallways every day. Cowards. He scrolled through them slowly, letting the poison drip over him without sinking in. At the very bottom of the post, someone had written, "Should have known. Look at him. Hoodie thug." Malik stared at the words. Just 4 words, but heavy enough to crush a lifetime. He could feel the anger simmering under his skin, the helplessness, the injustice, the weight of being judged before you even spoke. He thought about deleting the app. He thought about smashing the phone against the wall, but he didn't. Instead, he opened a new note and started typing. Not a rant, not an explanation, just the truth. Hoodie doesn't mean criminal. Hoodie doesn't mean threat. Hoodie doesn't mean anything except that I'm cold or tired or trying to feel safe in a world that looks at me like a target. I am not what you see. I am more. Malik stared at the words for a long time. Then he closed the note, locked his phone, and set it face down on the table. He sat there in the quiet, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a passing car. Tomorrow would be worse. He knew that. Grant wasn't finished. The whispers would get louder, the laughs sharper, the attacks more creative. But Malik also knew something else. He wasn't finished either, not by a long shot, because survival wasn't enough anymore. Now, he was ready to fight back, not with fists, not with shouting, but with something stronger, something they couldn't steal or mock or twist. His story, his truth, and he would wear it like armor, starting with the one thing they feared the most, his hoodie. Monday morning came wrapped in a thick layer of tension. Malik Rhodes stood at the bus stop, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie, backpack slung low over one shoulder. The world felt different now. He wasn't just another kid walking to school. He was the boy in the video, the name on their group chats, the punchline to a joke he never agreed to be part of. The bus doors hissed open, and Malik climbed aboard, ignoring the sideways glances and the sudden hush that fell over the rows of seats. He slid into a spot near the back, dropped his bag on the floor, and pulled his hoodie up a little higher. Not to hide, just to breathe. The ride to Brentwood High was a slow crawl through streets that somehow felt smaller than they had a week ago. As the bus rolled into the parking lot, Malik spotted clusters of students already gathering, their heads bent together, their phones lighting up their faces like tiny flashlights. He felt it before he even stepped off the bus. Today was going to be worse, much worse. Inside, the hallways buzzed with something almost electric. Whispers chased him from locker to locker. Eyes darted away when he caught them staring. Laughter crackled like static in the air. Sharp and mean. It wasn't random anymore. It was coordinated, organized, targeted. By the time Malik reached his locker, he knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. Not yet. Third period started like any other. Mr. Langston droned on about World War II at the front of the classroom while Malik scribbled notes. Head down, trying to disappear, and then it happened. A beep, then another, then another. Phones lit up all across the room. Students shifted in their seats, sneaking glances at their screens, nudging each other, snickering behind cupped hands. Malik's stomach dropped. He didn't have to check his phone. He already knew. Still, when his own phone vibrated against the desk, he glanced down. A single message blinked up at him. You made the wall of fame. Attached was a video clip. It showed Malik in the jewelry store. Grainy and distorted, Claudia's voice screeching, Malik frozen in place, the cuffs slamming onto his wrists. But the video had been edited. Thick red letters splashed across the screen. Hoodie Thug caught in the act. A chorus of fake news banners spun around his head in the video. Dollar bills rained down around him. Cartoon style, a voiceover grants, unmistakably narrated over the footage. When you try to be Brentwood rich, but end up Brentwood famous, the class erupted. Laughter exploded like fireworks. Chairs scraped back. Fists pounded desks. Mr. Langston tried weakly to restore order, but it was pointless. The wave of mockery had broken free, and nothing could hold it back now. Malik sat frozen, his face burning, his hands gripping the edges of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. He could feel every pair of eyes on him, mocking, judging, dismissing. He was no longer a person. He was a meme, a joke, a warning. When the bell finally rang, Malik stood up slowly, carefully, deliberately, the same way you move when the ground under your feet has turned into ice. He packed his bag, ignoring the snickers, the not-so-quiet whispers. The phone still held up to capture every humiliating moment. He walked out the door without looking back, because if he looked back, he might shatter, and Malik Rhodes refused to shatter. Not for them, not for anyone. But Brentwood High wasn't finished yet, not even close. As he rounded the corner toward his next class, Malik saw it, plastered across the lockers, taped to the walls, stuck to every surface like a sickness, flyers. Hundreds of them, the same image from the doctored video. His face twisted into a cartoonish sneer. Hoodie pulled low over his eyes. Above it, in bold black letters, wanted Brentwood's finest hoodie criminal. Below it, reward 10 cents and a ride back to where you came from. Students were ripping them down just to take pictures, laughing, tagging him in posts, hashtagging jokes. Malik stopped in the middle of the hallway, staring at the flyers fluttering like dead leaves around him. He felt hollow, like the part of him that still believed things could get better had just been carved out with a dull knife. For a long moment, he just stood there, the noise of the hallway spinning around him. He could hear Grant's voice somewhere nearby, loud and smug. "Yo, Rhodes, love the new look. Man, really suits you. More laughter." Another picture snapped. Another comment posted. Another little piece of Malik chipped away. He tightened his grip on his backpack strap, straightened his spine, and kept walking. Not because he didn't feel it. Not because he wasn't breaking inside. But because survival wasn't about pretending you were okay, it was about moving anyway. Even when your legs shook, even when the world tried to bury you. Especially then, the humiliation didn't stop at the Flyers. It followed Malik into every corner of Brentwood High. The gym, the cafeteria, even the library. Where whispers usually died under the weight of silence, it was everywhere. 1,000 tiny cuts, slicing deeper than any punch could, each laugh, each pointed finger, each fake cough that sounded suspiciously like Hoodie. It built up, layer by layer, until it felt like Malik was carrying the whole damn building on his back, and no one, not one teacher, not one adult said anything. Not Mr. Langston, not Principal Harris, not the hall monitors who stood idly by as kids high-fived each other in front of the wanted posters. They all saw, they all chose to look away, because kids like Grant Whitmore, they belonged here. Kids like Malik Rhodes, they were just visitors, tolerated, barely, until they made too much noise. At lunch, Malik sat at his usual corner table, tray untouched in front of him. He didn't bother eating. Food felt like it would turn to dust in his mouth anyway. From across the room, Grant lounged at the center table like a king surveying his kingdom. His friends clustered around him, laughing, shoving each other, showing off the newest edits of Malik's photo on their phones. One had added cartoon jail bars. Another had superimposed Malik's face onto a mugshot background. Malik caught bits and pieces of their conversation as they spoke, just loud enough for him to hear. "Bet he's got a record. Probably snuck into the school. Wonder if his mom taught him to steal." That one stung more than the rest, because they didn't know anything. They didn't know about Serena Rhodes. They didn't know about the nights she sat beside Malik, helping him with algebra homework even after 12-hour shifts at the FBI field office. They didn't know about the mornings she packed his lunches, her hands moving carefully, like she was building a future one sandwich at a time. They didn't know, and worse, they didn't care. Halfway through lunch, Malik's phone buzzed again. Another notification, another dagger. Against his better judgment, he checked it. It was a new post, a picture of him walking through the hallway that morning, backpack slung low, hoodie up, eyes cast down. The caption read, "Straight out of Brentwood Penitentiary." The comments were already piling up. Cry laugh emojis, tags to other students, a few flat-out racial slurs, casually thrown like stones. Malik locked the phone and shoved it deep into his backpack. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not today. Not ever. When the lunch bell rang, Malik didn't go straight to class. He ducked into the nearest bathroom, locking himself inside a stall. He sat on the closed toilet lid, backpack still slung across his chest like a shield, and he just sat, breathing, trying to remember what it felt like to exist without being a target, trying to remember who he was before the world decided for him. But the world's voice was louder now. It echoed in his mind with every scroll, every whisper, every cruel laugh. He could feel it pressing against him from all sides, trying to crush him, trying to fold him down into the neat little box they had built for him. Hoodie, thug, criminal. That was the story they wanted, and no matter what he did, it felt like he was trapped inside it, suffocating, drowning. A sharp knock on the stall door jolted Malik back to reality. He stiffened. "Yo, Rhodes!" A voice sneered from the other side. You forget your court date or something. Laughter peeled through the bathroom, bouncing off the tiled walls. Malik stayed silent, stone still. The footsteps receded after a minute, but the damage was done. Another crack in the armor, another reminder. He wasn't safe here. Not in the hallways, not in the classrooms, not even behind locked doors. Nowhere. Finally, Malik stood up, shouldered his backpack, washed his face in the cracked mirror above the sink. The boy staring back at him looked older than 16, older than he had any right to be. He straightened his hoodie, squared his shoulders, and walked back into the hallway, head high, face blank, heart bruised, but not broken. Not yet, because deep down, underneath the exhaustion, underneath the anger, underneath the heavy sadness that clung to him like second skin, there was still something burning, something fierce, something they hadn't managed to stamp out. Not yet. And as long as that fire was there, even just a spark, Malik knew he could survive this. Maybe he could even do more than survive. Maybe he could fight. The rest of the day blurred by. Classes came and went, but Malik barely heard a word the teacher said. The words floated past him, meaningless, like leaves in a rushing river. He kept his head down, kept moving, one foot in front of the other. But every step felt heavier. Every stare burned hotter. By the time the final bell rang, Malik was moving on autopilot. He barely registered the students spilling into the hallways around him, the lockers slamming shut, the laughter echoing off the high ceilings. He just wanted to get out. Out of the building, out of the whispers, out of the story they had written for him without his permission. He pushed open the front doors of the school and stepped into the bright afternoon sun. For a brief moment, he thought maybe he had made it. Maybe he could just walk home, quiet, invisible, forget today ever happened. But as he crossed the courtyard, he saw them. Grant and his crew, waiting, leaning casually against a line of cars like they had all the time in the world. Malik's gut twisted. He didn't break stride, didn't show fear, but every step toward them felt like walking into a trap he couldn't see a way out of. Grant pushed off the hood of his car as Malik passed, falling into step beside him. "Hey, Rhodes," he drawled. "How's life behind bars?" His friend snickered. Malik kept walking, silent. Stone, daar kun je er in de second war. But Grant wasn't finished. "You know," he said, loud enough for everyone in the parking lot to hear, "I heard Harrington's is still missing a few things. Maybe we should pat you down, just to be safe." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Some of the kids nearby laughed. Some just looked away, pretending not to see, pretending it wasn't their problem. Grant moved faster than Malik expected. 1 second, Malik was walking. The next, Grant's hand was on his backpack, yanking it backward hard. Malik stumbled, twisting to keep his balance. Before he could react, Grant grabbed the edge of his hoodie, tugging it down hard over Malik's eyes, blinding him, disorienting him. The world turned black. Someone shoved him from behind. He staggered forward, nearly falling. Laughter roared around him, filling the air, thick and suffocating. Look at him, can't even see where he's going. Stealing in the dark. Huh. Malik ripped the hoodie back up, blinking against the sunlight. His heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to swing, wanted to scream, wanted to make them feel even a fraction of the humiliation boiling inside him. But he didn't. He stood there, shaking, breathing, choosing not to give them what they wanted, choosing himself. Grant stepped closer, smirking. "You gonna cry?" "Rhodes," he taunted. "Come on, man, give us a show." Malik stared at him, long and hard. And for the first time, he saw it, really saw it. Grant wasn't strong. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't even confident. He was scared. Scared of someone he couldn't control. Just scared of a truth too big to fit into the neat little story he needed to believe. Malik's lips curled into the smallest, coldest smile. "No show today," he said quietly. And he turned his back. Walked away. One step at a time. The laughter followed him all the way down the sidewalk. Sharp, cruel, meant to stick to his skin like burrs. But Malik didn't stop. Didn't look back. Didn't give them the dignity of his rage. Because he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was learning how to endure without shrinking. Learning how to stand tall even when the world tried to fold him in half. Learning that sometimes the greatest rebellion wasn't screaming. It was refusing to be broken. When he finally turned the corner, out of sight of the school, Malik let out a long, slow breath. His hands were still shaking, his knees still weak, but he was standing. He was still standing. And for today, that was enough. For today, he had won. Not because he fought back with fists, but because he refused to let them write the end of his story. They could mock the hoodie. They could twist the truth. They could build walls out of whispers and laughter and lies. But they couldn't touch what mattered most. The fire still burning inside him. The fire that told him he was more than the hoodie, more than the whispers, more than the fear they tried to plant in his chest. He was Malik Rhodes. And this was just the beginning. The following morning, Malik woke up to silence, not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that settles into the corners of your room like fog after a long, brutal night. He sat up slowly, his muscles sore, his mind still tangled in the echoes of yesterday. He glanced at the bracelet on Kira's nightstand, still resting where she had left it before bed. Even that beautiful thing felt like it belonged to another world now, a quieter one, a safer one. Not this, not what Brentwood had become. At school, Malik didn't expect a fresh start, but nothing could have prepared him for what waited in first period. He stepped into the classroom and froze. On the projector screen, displayed in full brightness, was a photo of him. Not just any photo. It was a still from the doctored video, his face mid-blink, mouth slightly open, hoodie low over his brow. Above it, someone had added bright red words, "Know your suspects, today's feature. Malik Rhodes." The class erupted, laughter, shouts. A few kids clapped. Malik turned to the teacher, Mr. Jenkins Young, freshly credentialed, always too nervous to handle conflict. Mr. Jenkins stood frozen behind his desk, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. He hadn't put the image up. That much was clear. Someone had hacked into the classroom system. Again, Malik didn't wait. He walked to the computer, unplugged the projector cord, and stood there, hands shaking. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. No one answered. Just more laughter, more phones lifted into the air, more whispers spreading like a wildfire with no interest in truth. Later that day, he found his locker wide open. He hadn't left it that way. Books torn from the shelves. His notebooks were shredded, actual pages, ripped apart like someone had taken the time to destroy them piece by piece. But that wasn't the worst part. Spray painted across the inside wall of the locker. In thick black letters, "Go back to the hood." No one saw who did it. No cameras in that hallway. No witnesses willing to speak. Of course there weren't. By lunch, Malik felt like a storm cloud with legs. He didn't sit in the cafeteria, didn't even bother walking through it. He took his tray and walked outside, finding a quiet spot under the old oak tree near the faculty parking lot. It wasn't much, but it was away from the noise, away from the phones, away from the performance of cruelty that Brentwood had turned into a daily routine. He picked at his sandwich, staring into the distance, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself feel it. The full weight, not just the anger, but the grief. Grief for the version of himself that had believed hard work would be enough. Grief for the dream that had once seemed simple: study hard, stay out of trouble, make your mom proud. Grief for how fast everything could be taken, twisted, turned, mocked. He didn't notice the shadow until it fell across his lap. He looked up slowly. It was Principal Harris, tall, gray suit, tie perfectly knotted, face carved into permanent neutrality. "Mr. Rhodes," Harris said, clearing his throat, "I've been made aware of some tension between you and other students." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Tension?" Harris nodded slowly. "I'd like to encourage you to consider stepping back from any confrontational behavior. We're trying to maintain a peaceful academic environment." Malik stared at him, unblinking. "You think I started this?" he asked, his voice low. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." A pause. Harris glanced around, as if to make sure no one was watching. "Just be careful what you post online. Things can spiral. You don't want to feed the fire." Malik let out a breath that felt more like a laugh. "I didn't start the fire, sir." And he stood, left his tray on the bench, walked back toward the building, each step heavier than the last. Behind him, Harris remained standing under the tree, his face unreadable. By the end of the day, Malik was exhausted, not just physically, soul tired. He was heading down the back stairwell when he got the notification. It was from an anonymous account. The message read, "You should watch your back. We don't call the cops next time." Attached was a blurry photo of him walking alone in the hallway earlier that day. Someone had been following him, watching. He stood in the stairwell, heart pounding. The air felt thick, too still, too quiet. He shoved the phone in his pocket and kept moving. This wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't just humiliation. This was something else now. This was a threat. Malik didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his room lit by the dull glow of a street lamp outside the window. The message replayed in his mind like a skipping record. "You should watch your back. We don't call the cops next time." He kept hearing the click of the camera, even though it hadn't made a sound. Someone had followed him. Someone had waited until the moment no one else was looking. Someone had crossed a line. By morning, the pressure in Malik's chest had grown into something he couldn't ignore. He couldn't eat, couldn't think, could barely breathe. He thought about telling his mom, but she had been up late the night before. Paperwork spread across the dining table like a battlefield. She needed sleep. And Malik, he needed to handle this alone, like he always had. The day started quiet, too quiet, no new flyers, no new chants in the hallway. Grant was nowhere to be seen, but that only made Malik more uneasy. He felt eyes on him all day, just out of view, just out of reach, like someone had flipped the script, like the mockery had gone underground. And that was worse, because now he couldn't see it coming. It wasn't until seventh period that the next blow landed. Malik was in the computer lab, typing out an English paper, when the kid next to him, a sophomore he didn't even know, gasped, "Dude, you need to see this." Malik turned. The kid's phone screen showed a private Instagram story. One Malik hadn't been tagged in, but it was about him. It was always about him now. The video was dark and shaky, clearly filmed at night. It showed the outside of Malik's apartment complex. The camera zoomed in on the front door. Then someone's voice, distorted but unmistakably white and smug, whispered, "Should we leave a little present for the hoodie boy?" The camera panned down to reveal what they left on the welcome mat. A black trash bag, tied shut. The person filming laughed and whispered again, "Hope he likes leftovers." And then they ran. The video cut off. Malik stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Every eye in the lab turned to him, but he didn't care. He grabbed his backpack and bolted. Didn't ask permission, didn't check the clock, didn't stop. He took the bus home in silence, the city blurring past. His hands gripped the seat so tight his knuckles ached. When he reached his stop, he sprinted down the block. His building came into view, its brick walls worn but familiar. And there, on the doormat in front of his apartment, was the bag, still there, still waiting. He stood over it, chest heaving. The plastic rustled faintly in the breeze. He didn't want to touch it, didn't want to know, but he had to. He crouched down slowly, hands trembling, and untied the knot. The smell hit him first. Rotten food, mold, something worse. Inside the bag was a mess of old takeout containers, chicken bones, dirty paper towels, and on top, a note written in thick black marker. Trash belongs in the trash. Malik stared at it for a long time, long enough for the anger to settle, not into rage, but into something colder, sharper, more focused. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a joke. This was a message, a warning, a threat, dressed up in trash. He didn't go inside right away. He sat on the stoop for nearly an hour, the bag sitting beside him, untouched now. His phone buzzed twice, one text from Kira asking when he'd be home, and another from someone anonymous. Just 3 words, "We see you." He deleted the second text, but he didn't delete the photo he took of the note. He stared at it, then saved it to a folder he labeled evidence, because things were changing fast, and if no one else was going to protect him, he was going to protect himself. That night, when Serena finally got home, Malik didn't say anything. Not yet. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he needed to be sure. Sure. This wasn't just kids being cruel. Sure. This was more than a whisper campaign. And deep down, he already was. They had crossed the line. They weren't laughing anymore. They were hunting. And Malik, he was done hiding. Malik didn't go to school the next day. He woke up early, dressed, packed his backpack like always. But when he stood at the door, something in him froze. Not fear exactly. Something older, heavier. It was instinct, the kind passed down in silence from mother to son, from father to ghost, the kind that said, "Today is not the day you walk into their trap." So he sat in the living room, on the floor, back against the couch, hoodie pulled tight, waiting. Serena found him there around 7:45. Just as she was grabbing her keys, she paused, eyebrow raised. "You sick?" she asked gently. Malik shook his head, but he didn't look up. She walked over, crouched beside him, her heels clicking softly against the worn hardwood. "You didn't just miss your bus by accident." Still, Malik didn't speak. Serena studied him for a long moment, and then, quietly, she asked, "Was it just the flyers that broke something?" He closed his eyes, let out a slow breath. "They filmed our door." "Mom," he whispered. "They left a bag of garbage, said I belonged in it." Serena didn't move, didn't speak, but Malik felt her whole body go still beside him. "Then they sent me pictures of it." He added, "And a message, 'We see you.'" For a long time, the room was silent. Then Serena stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain back slightly. Her voice, when it came, was low, measured, deadly calm. "Do you know who did it?" "Not exactly," Malik said, but Grant's voice was in the video. Serena nodded once. Then she turned to face him. "What do you want to do?" It wasn't a question parents usually asked. Not in this tone, not with this kind of weight behind it. But Serena knew. This wasn't about overreacting. This was about survival, about control, and giving Malik a say in a world that kept trying to silence him. Malik looked up at her, eyes tired, but steady. "I want them to know I'm not scared." Serena didn't smile. but her eyes lit just for a moment with something fierce. "You're not," she said. "That's why they're scared of you." That afternoon, Serena called the school, asked for a meeting with Principal Harris, insisted it happen after hours. She didn't want Malik walking back into that building until the air had changed. Not until people understood they had crossed a line. Not until something shifted. At 4:00 p.m. sharp, Serena and Malik walked through the front doors of Brentwood High. The halls were quiet now, empty, but Malik still felt them. The eyes, the whispers, the shadows that clung to the lockers like bad memories. Principal Harris met them in his office. Polite smile, careful words, the kind adults use when they're more worried about liability than justice. Serena sat across from him, crossed her legs slowly, and placed a folder on the desk. "Inside," she said, "you'll find screenshots, video captures, and a copy of the anonymous messages sent to my son." Harris opened the folder, scanned a few pages, and let out a tight sigh. "This is concerning." Malik sat beside his mother, silent but present, solid. Harris cleared his throat. "We, of course, condemn all bullying. And this isn't bullying." Serena interrupted, voice flat. "This is harassment, intimidation, targeted racial abuse." Harris flinched. "We're handling it internally," he offered. "Not anymore." Serena said, "This is now a federal matter, and I'm not just a mother. I'm a federal agent. I know the laws you're trying to tiptoe around." The room went very quiet. Malik watched as Harris shifted in his seat, suddenly unsure of the power he thought he had. "Expect an official report by the end of the day." Serena continued, "And until further notice, my son will not be returning to the school unless you can guarantee his safety." On record, Harris swallowed hard. Understood. On the way out, Malik paused at the edge of the empty cafeteria. The same tables, the same floors, but today, something was different. Not in them, in him. He wasn't walking out because he was weak. He was walking out because this place had failed to break him, and that made him dangerous. As he stepped outside, the sun hit his face, warm and golden. He pulled his hoodie up over his head, not to hide, but to remind himself and everyone else that he still stood, still walked, still fought, even when they came for him in the dark, even when they crossed every line. The call came just after sunset. Serena was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, sleeves rolled to her elbows, steam rising from the sink like a soft cloud. Malik sat at the table, helping Kira with a science project about constellations, trying, at least, to keep his head in the stars while his feet still dragged through the mud of the past few weeks. Then her phone rang. One glance at the screen, and Serena wiped her hands, voice calm as always, but her eyes shifted. She stepped into the hallway and answered, "Hey." There was a pause, then a quiet voice on the other end. Too low for Malik to hear, but he didn't have to. He knew who it was, and he knew why. Serena came back into the kitchen 10 minutes later. She moved slowly, deliberately, and when she spoke, it wasn't with a question, it was a statement. "Your father's flying in tomorrow." Malik blinked, then stared. He hadn't seen his dad in almost 2 years. Not since the divorce, not since the fallout, not since everything cracked between them like glass under pressure. He remembered the last words he'd said to him, cold, sharp, louder than they should have been. He remembered the silence that followed. Now, suddenly, he was coming back. "Why?" Malik asked. Serena met his gaze. "You're not the only one being watched." The next day was quiet, almost too quiet. Malik stayed home again. Under what Principal Harris was now calling a temporary security reassessment, Serena worked from the apartment, phone glued to her hand, voice steady as she coordinated from behind the scenes. The building felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. At 3:08 p.m., the intercom buzzed. Serena answered, gave a name, then she opened the door. And there he was, Julius Rhodes, 6'3", dark wool coat, clean-shaven head, broad shoulders carved from years of military posture that never faded. Even long after he left that world behind, he stepped into the apartment without fanfare, without a smile. But the moment Malik saw him, something deep inside stirred, not comfort, not fear, just gravity. Like the room shifted to make space for him, like the air thickened. Julius looked at Malik, didn't say anything for a second. "Then you all right?" "Son," Malik nodded once. "I'm good." Julius nodded too, but both of them knew it wasn't true. They didn't talk much that night. Didn't need to. Julius sat at the dinner table. Kira curled beside him, already calling him Pops like nothing had changed. Malik stayed mostly quiet, eating slow, watching, studying the man who had shaped half his face, half his voice, half his fire. After Kira went to bed, the three of them sat in the living room. Serena pulled out the folder, the same one she had handed Harris. She opened it in front of Julius. He flipped through it slowly. The photos, the screenshots, the video stills, his face didn't change. Not once. But Malik saw it. In the set of his jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly against the paper, the way he paused just a little too long on the image of the trash bag at their door. When he finally closed the folder, the room was silent. And then Julius said, "Do they think this is over?" Serena leaned back. "They think the warning was enough. They think we'll back down." Julius looked at Malik again. "You want to back down?" Malik shook his head, slow and certain. "No." Julius nodded once, as if that was all he needed. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "Then it's time we remind them who raised you." The next morning, Julius walked Malik to school, not in a protective way, not like a bodyguard, but like a father, a presence. He didn't speak much, didn't need to. His silence was louder than most people shouting. As they approached Brentwood High, students turned, phones came out, but this time, no one laughed, no one whispered. Julius walked beside Malik, slow and steady, head high, eyes forward, and when they reached the front steps, he placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. Not heavy, just there. And then he said, "Low and even walk in like you own the building." Malik looked up at him, saw the steel behind his calm, and nodded. Then he stepped inside, and this time, the building didn't swallow him whole. This time, the hallways made space. This time, the hoodie didn't walk alone. The news spread before second period even started. Malik had walked through the front doors of Brentwood High with a man beside him, tall, broad-shouldered, silent. And nobody knew what to do with that. He wasn't security. He wasn't a teacher. He was just there. And the way he stood, it made everyone feel like they were suddenly walking on broken glass. In the front office, Julia signed in like any other visitor, but the woman behind the desk, Mrs. Donnelly, a Brentwood lifer with a bob haircut and eyes that had seen decades of gossip, fumbled with the visitor sticker. Her hands trembled just slightly. "You're here to see Principal Harris?" she asked, voice a touch too high. Julius nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I have a meeting." She smiled. "Nervous? About your son?" I presume Julius didn't smile back. He just looked her straight in the eye and said, "About the way this school let people forget who he is." 10 minutes later, Principal Harris sat across from Julius in his office, the same place Serena had sat just days earlier. This time, there was no folder, just a man with a presence so heavy it made the room shrink. Harris tried to open with small talk. "We appreciate you coming, Mr. Rhodes. We're all working toward de-escalation here." But Julius wasn't there to chat. He leaned forward, slow, calm, deliberate, his hands folded on the desk. "I'm not here for de-escalation. he said. I'm here for change. Harris blinked. Pardon, you had your chance to handle this quietly. Julius continued. You failed. Now I want names. Harris shifted in his seat. Mr. Rhodes, I understand your frustration. No, you don't. Julius cut in. You don't understand what it feels like to know your son isn't safe walking into a school with cameras in every hallway and adults in every room. He pointed toward the window. You let a system form under your nose. You let my boy become a target. Harris opened his mouth. But Julius wasn't done. I served 20 years protecting this country. I've seen war. I've seen organized hatred. And I know what it looks like when silence becomes permission. Julius leaned back. You've been silent too long. That same day, something shifted in the building. First, the flyers disappeared, all of them, not just from the walls, but from phones, group chats, even the burner accounts that had been circulating the video. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Next, a list appeared on Harris's desk, anonymous but detailed. Names, dates, screenshots. Someone or several someone had finally decided to speak. And the names on that list, Grant Whitmore, Evan Nolan, Travis Keel, and 6 others. Every one of them had played a part. Every one of them had helped turn Malik's life into a stage for public humiliation. And now they were exposed. By lunch, whispers filled the halls again. But this time, they weren't about Malik. They were about Grant, about the list, about parents being called, about suspensions pending, about zero tolerance suddenly meaning something. Malik sat in the library, headphones on, hoodie up, watching it unfold in silence. He didn't smile, didn't smirk, just listened to the sound of the narrative cracking, to the fear in the voices of those who had once laughed the loudest. That afternoon, Serena picked him up early, but it wasn't because he was scared. It was because he had a meeting with someone he hadn't seen since everything started. Mr. Carver, head of Brentwood School Board. He had requested it, though Malik knew, deep down, it hadn't been a request. It had been Julius. In the small boardroom, Malik sat straight in his chair, Serena on one side, Julius on the other. Mr. Carver cleared his throat. We want to apologize for the systemic failures that allowed this to escalate. Malik said nothing. Carver glanced at Julius. We're also reviewing our staff oversight, hallway monitoring, and social media policy. Still silence. Carver finally turned back to Malik. Is there anything you'd like to say? Son. Malik leaned forward. His voice was soft, but it landed like a brick. You all looked the other way for weeks, not because you didn't see it, but because you didn't think someone like me was worth protecting. Carver flinched. Malik continued. I don't want your apology. I want change, real change, and not just for me. He looked Carver dead in the eye. For every black kid who walks through these doors in a hoodie and gets judged before they even speak, you owe them more than silence. When they left the building, Julius placed a hand on Malik's back firm. Steady, you did good, he said. Malik nodded, not because he needed approval, but because for the first time, he felt power without rage, because for the first time, he didn't just walk through the fire, he helped burn down the lie that built it. The next morning, Brentwood High was not the same. For the first time in weeks, Malik walked through the front doors and no one looked him in the eye. Not because they were mocking him, but because they didn't know what to do with silence that stood its ground. The hallway was quieter. The flyers were gone. The mocking voices silent, and in their place uncertainty, fear, respect. Maybe, if not for Malik, then for the shadow that now walked behind his name. Julius didn't come to school that day. He didn't need to. His work had already started to echo through the system. Emails went out to every faculty member that morning, new harassment reporting procedures, new disciplinary standards, new monitoring of hallway activity, and one more thing, an official letter from the district office, mandatory sensitivity and racial bias training for all staff, effective immediately, required, not requested, signed off by the board. Pushed through not by argument, but by presence. Julius Rhodes didn't threaten anyone. He reminded them what it looked like when a father protected his child not with fists or lawsuits, but with immovable conviction. And people listened, because silence fears a man who doesn't raise his voice, only his expectations. Malik moved through the halls differently now, not cocky, not cold, just grounded, like he had roots now, like the wind couldn't push him over anymore. People still stared, but it was different. Some faces held shame, some curiosity, some the ones who used to laugh avoided him completely. He didn't mind. He didn't need their smiles. He just needed space to breathe. Grant Whitmore didn't show up that week. Rumor had it he was suspended maybe longer. His varsity privileges gone. His scholarship recommendation from Coach Wallace pulled. His reputation cracked. And the whispers followed him now. Not Malik. Grant. Did you hear his dad's trying to cover it up? They said there's a whole file on him. Can you believe he used to run this place? It was ironic. The same boys who used to orbit him now kept their distance. Because power built on cruelty always collapses when the foundation shifts. And thanks to Julius, the ground was shifting fast. On Thursday, something happened that Malik didn't expect. During fourth period, his teacher, Mrs. Rayburn, asked him to stay after class. She was an older woman, strict, sharp, the kind who rarely showed emotion. Malik figured she'd talk about his missing assignments or that week he'd been gone. But instead, she closed the door quietly and said, "I've taught at Brentwood for 19 years. Malik, he nodded, unsure where she was going. She continued, "And I've seen a lot of students come and go. But I want you to know, I've never seen one handle what you've handled with the strength you did." Malik blinked. She didn't sound rehearsed. She sounded honest. "I should have said something sooner," she added. "I'm sorry I didn't." Malik didn't speak right away. Then, quietly, "Thank you." And in that moment, the weight in his chest lightened just a little, because sometimes justice doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it drips. One voice at a time, one apology at a time, one teacher realizing silence is no longer acceptable. That night, Julia sat with Malik on the fire escape outside their apartment. They didn't talk about the school. They talked about the stars, about Kira's constellation project, and about the moonlight hitting the rooftops just right. And after a while, Julius asked, "You scared anymore?" Malik thought about the pain, the humiliation, the threats, the silence that had once swallowed him whole, and then about now, about walking tall, about truth rising, about being seen, really seen, not as a problem, but as a person. He shook his head slowly. "No." Julius nodded. "Good, because this world will try everything to make you afraid of your own shadow." He looked Malik in the eye. "You just remind them you come from a long line of men who don't run from it." The wind picked up slightly, brushing Malik's hoodie back from his face. He let it fall, didn't rush to pull it up, didn't need to, because that hoodie wasn't a mask anymore. It was a statement, a flag, a reminder that they feared the wrong boy, and that from now on, his story wouldn't be told for him. He'd write it himself. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The powerful don't fall in a single, dramatic crash. They slip. They stumble. They lose their grip one fingertip at a time until there's nothing left to hold on to. And in Brentwood High, that slow unraveling had already begun. It started with whispers, but not the kind that used to follow Malik. These whispers pointed the other way now, at Grant Whitmore. He came back to school the following Monday. Not with his usual swagger, no varsity jacket, no crowd trailing behind him, no sideways grins or loud jokes. He walked alone, and the hallway made room not out of respect, out of discomfort, out of fear. People moved aside like he carried something contagious, and in a way, he did. Exposure. No one wanted to stand next to someone whose name had become a warning sign. Malik saw him by the lockers, pulling out his books like nothing had happened. Grant didn't look up, didn't make eye contact, didn't speak. Malik didn't either, because sometimes silence speaks louder than revenge, and this wasn't Malik's battle anymore. It was gravity doing its work, and gravity always wins. That afternoon, word spread that Grant had been cut from the basketball team. Coach didn't explain why, didn't need to. Everyone knew. The administration wouldn't say if his college applications were affected, but his name didn't show up on the list of scholarship nominations posted outside the counselor's office. And just like that, Brentwood's golden boy wasn't so golden anymore. But it wasn't just Grant. Evan Nolan, the kid who posted the doctored video, got pulled into the office and never came back to class. Travis Keel, the one who had whispered trash belongs in the trash, loud enough for Malik to hear, got dropped from 2 AP classes and was placed on disciplinary probation, one by one. The dominoes fell, quietly, efficiently, almost like the school had known it all along and had simply waited to see how far they'd go before doing anything about it. Now that parents were watching, now that the board had been forced to act, now they moved, not out of justice, but out of damage control. Still, it was something, and for Malik, that was enough. He didn't cheer, didn't gloat. He just sat in class, took notes, helped Kira with her projects, and drank tea with Serena in the evenings while Julius read the paper. Life, for the first time in a long time, started to resemble something like peace. Not perfect, but steady, and steady was sacred. One day, as Malik left a history class, a voice called out behind him, "Hey, Malik!" He turned. It was Chase Donner, one of Grant's old friends, a bench warmer on the team. Never said much, never laughed out loud, but never stopped it either. Chase looked nervous, fidgety. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" Malik crossed his arms, about what Chase swallowed hard. "Look, I never posted anything, but I didn't stop it either. And I should have. I guess I was scared of becoming the next target." Malik studied him. "You weren't scared. You were comfortable." Chase looked like he'd been slapped. Malik didn't say it with venom, just truth. Chase nodded slowly. "You're right." A pause. Then, "Surprisingly, are you okay?" Malik gave a small, measured shrug. "I'm here." Chase nodded again. "I'm sorry." This time, Malik didn't reply, not with words. He just turned and kept walking, because forgiveness isn't always a sentence. Sometimes it's just the decision to keep going without dragging the weight of someone else's guilt behind you. The next day, a notice appeared on the main bulletin board near the front office. A new student-led committee, the Equity and Accountability Task Force. Malik's name wasn't on it. He didn't apply, didn't volunteer, but somehow, his shadow stretched across every word of that announcement. Because sometimes, real change doesn't come with a title. It comes with resistance, with survival, with standing so still and so strong that the storm breaks itself against you. And while Brentwood was still Brentwood, still lined with money and quiet prejudice hiding behind smiles, something had cracked. A fracture now ran through the foundation, and Malik Rhodes had become the proof that truth, even in silence, can shake walls to the core. By the end of the week, the silence had turned awkward, not tense, not loud, just uncomfortable, a vacuum. The kind that follows when power leaves the room and nobody's quite sure who it belongs to anymore. Brentwood High was adrift. The hierarchy had collapsed. The kings had been knocked off their thrones not by a revolution, but by their own reflection and everyone else. They were trying to figure out what came next. In third period, Malik noticed something strange. People were being polite. The girl who used to giggle when someone whispered, "Hoodie boy," under their breath, now offered him a pen when his broke. A boy from chemistry, someone who hadn't spoken to Malik once all year, held the door open for him without making eye contact. Little things, meaningless. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. But either way, it wasn't respect. Not yet. Malik could feel the difference. Respect was earned. This was reaction. That afternoon, he passed the library and saw Grant Whitmore sitting alone at a back table. No friends, no phone out, just a blank notebook and a pencil. Untouched. It was a strange image, the boy who used to command every room now trying to disappear inside one. For a split second, Malik considered walking in, sitting across from him, saying something. But what was there to say? What words could undo weeks of cruelty? What apology could unring the bell Grant had spent so long banging? So Malik kept walking, because not every confrontation needed closure. Sometimes, the cleanest justice is distance. But not everything had fallen yet. There were still cracks hidden beneath polished surfaces, still people in shadows who hadn't been touched by the fire yet, and some of them were getting nervous. Later that week, Serena received an email from the district, a formal request. The board wanted Malik and his parents to attend a community reconciliation forum to heal and build understanding. Malik read the email over her shoulder and said nothing. Julius did. He leaned forward and asked just one question. Is anyone being held accountable at this forum? Or is this just a photo op? The line went silent. Then came the careful reply. It's a chance to reset the tone. Julius exhaled through his nose. The tone got set when y'all let a child carry a systems failure on his back. They didn't attend the forum. They didn't need to. Healing doesn't come from being asked to shake hands with the people who once weaponized their silence. Healing starts when the system admits it was built to break people like you in the first place. Still, Malik wasn't bitter. Not anymore. He didn't walk through the halls with vengeance in his eyes or fire in his fists. He walked calm, collected, but grounded in something far stronger than fear. He walked like someone who had seen the worst and refused to carry it forward. On Friday, his creative writing teacher handed him a slip of paper after class. It was a flyer for a statewide essay competition. Write Your America, theme voice, identity, and belonging. She smiled softly. You've got something to say. Malik, the world's finally listening. Maybe it's time to speak. He folded the paper, slid it into his notebook. Didn't promise anything, but that night, he sat on his bedroom floor, opened a blank Google Doc, and typed one sentence. I was never silent. You just weren't listening. In that moment, Malik understood something simple. Sometimes the fall isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, internal. Sometimes it looks like a hallway of kids who don't know where to stand anymore, or a teacher who starts watching more carefully, or a locker with no slurs on the inside, or just the absence of laughter when you walk past. And sometimes that's enough, not to forget, but to rebuild, brick by honest brick. 'Cause in Brentwood, everything that had once felt permanent was shifting. And Malik, he wasn't just standing in the middle of it. He was becoming the reason it moved. Friday afternoon, the final bell of the week rang through Brentwood High like a sigh. Students poured into the hallways, flooding past lockers and bulletin boards, eager to escape the building and everything it carried. For most, it was the end of a long 5 days. For Malik Rhodes, it was something else. He didn't rush. He moved slow, deliberate, every step measured like it meant something. Because now, it did. He zipped his hoodie halfway. Not because he needed to, but because it belonged to him, and it always had. He was nearly out the main entrance when he heard it. Malik, that voice, low, uneven, like someone unused to vulnerability. He turned. There stood Grant Whitmore, no varsity jacket, no crew of followers, no smug grin, just a boy, slightly hunched, with his hands deep in his hoodie pocket like he was holding on to something fragile. Malik stood still, waiting. Grant stepped closer. I, uh, I heard about the essay thing, he said, clearing his throat. That's cool. Malik gave no reply. Grant scratched the back of his neck. I guess I just wanted to say, I didn't mean for it to go that far. Malik tilted his head. That far, Grant blinked. The words caught in his throat. You know what I mean, he said weakly. Malik's jaw tightened. No, I don't. You're going to have to explain it to me. Grant shifted. His face reddened. I was just mad. I guess you showed up. People started talking about you like you were something special. Malik's stare didn't waver. So, what you thought if you tore me down, they'd look back at you. Grant didn't answer. You didn't just mock me. Malik said, you dehumanized me. You made me a punchline in a video. You led people to my home. His voice was calm, but every word hit like a drum beat in a silent room. And you didn't stop when the laughs stopped being funny. You kept going until it was dangerous. Grant looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I know I messed up. Malik crossed his arms. You didn't mess up. You made a choice. Every day. Over and over again. Silence. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, Grant asked, You ever going to forgive me? Malik took a long breath. He thought about Serena's quiet strength, Julius's still, watchful gaze, Kira's innocent questions, and everything he'd walked through, not just the pain, but the restraint. You want the truth, Grant nodded. Malik looked him in the eye. I don't hate you. I don't wish anything bad on you. But forgiveness, he shook his head. That's not something I owe you. That's something you earn. And you haven't started. Grant's shoulders slumped. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the answer he needed. And Grant, Malik added, turning halfway toward the door, if you really want to make something right, don't start with me. Start with the next kid you think is easy to break. Grant stood there, frozen, as Malik walked away. No fist thrown, no grand speech. Just a truth that hit deeper than punishment. Outside, the sun spilled across the courtyard like honey. Students lingered, some watching, others pretending not to. Malik didn't care. He passed the wall where the flyers had once been taped, gone now, scrubbed clean. But he remembered every inch of it, not with bitterness, but with power, because remembering is how we don't repeat. When Malik got home, Serena was lighting a candle at the kitchen table. Kira was coloring in stars and constellations again, this time drawing one named Big Hoodie. Malik smiled and kissed the top of her head. In the corner, Julius looked up from a folder of case notes. Their eyes met. A quiet nod passed between them. No words, none needed. That evening, Malik sat at his desk. He opened the essay file again, scrolled through what he had already written. He added a final line, not for the judges, not for the school, but for himself. The hardest part wasn't what they did. The hardest part was staying myself through it. And I did. He saved the file, leaned back in his chair, exhaled, and somewhere outside, the streetlight flickered on soft, steady, like a stage light for the boy they once tried to silence, but couldn't. Monday morning arrived quietly. There were no whispers, no flyers, no new edited videos circulating in private group chats, just sunlight pushing through classroom windows, the quiet rustle of notebooks opening, and the dull hum of a school trying to reset itself. But something had changed, not just in the halls, not just in the staff meetings. In Malik. He sat at his desk in English class, hoodie unzipped, head held high. Mrs. Rayburn stood at the front, going over that week's prompt for the statewide essay competition, voice, identity, belonging. She read aloud from the board, 3 words, pick one to start with. Malik didn't need to pick. He already knew. His pen moved before he even realized it. Each stroke of ink like a footstep on a road he'd already walked. I didn't grow into my voice. I fought to keep it from being stolen. The class was quiet, focused. No one stared anymore. No one laughed. The boy in the hoodie had become something they didn't know how to label anymore. And for once, that was a good thing. Later that day, Mrs. Rayburn asked Malik to stay behind after class. He approached her desk, unsure if something was wrong, but she just smiled. You ever thought about sharing your writing out loud? Malik raised an eyebrow. In front of people, she nodded. We're hosting a school-wide assembly Friday. Student voices, no scripts, just stories. Malik hesitated. He wasn't a performer. He didn't like stages. But then again, maybe this wasn't about performance. Maybe it was about ownership, about reclaiming the narrative that had nearly buried him. He didn't answer right away, but something inside him had already said yes. Friday came fast. The auditorium filled slowly, rows of students shuffling in, voices low with curiosity. A banner above the stage read, One School. Many stories. Malik sat backstage, fingers gripping the folded pages in his lap. His essay wasn't long, just a few minutes, but it carried the weight of weeks, of history, of being seen, misjudged, laughed at, and still choosing to stand. Serena sat in the second row, Julius beside her in a pressed blazer. Kira was there too, swinging her legs, wearing her astronaut bracelet and a hoodie 2 sizes too big, just like her brother's. When Malik's name was called, the room clapped politely. No cheers, no side eyes, just attention, real attention. He stepped up to the mic, unfolded his paper, and looked out at the sea of faces that once made him feel like a ghost. Then he began. My name is Malik Rhodes. I'm 16, and for the last 2 months, I've been watched, judged, mocked, and humiliated not for what I did, but for what I looked like while doing nothing. A hush fell over the crowd. I didn't break rules. I didn't fight back. I didn't threaten anyone. What I did was wear a hoodie, and apparently, that was threat enough. He scanned the room. No shaking, no stuttering, just truth. I watch people I sit next to every day turn me into a villain. I saw teachers stay quiet. I saw friends disappear. I saw what happens when fear gets louder than facts. He held up the pages slightly. This essay isn't just for a grade. It's a reminder that silence is a choice, and too many of you chose it. No one looked away now, not even Grant, who sat 2 rows from the back. Eyes locked on the stage, Malik's voice softened. But here's what I learned. You can take my image, you can twist it, you can laugh, but you don't get to erase me. Because I am not your headline. I am not your joke. I am not your warning story. He stepped closer to the mic. I am my own. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent, the kind that only comes when something true cuts through the noise and lands right where it needs to. Then came the applause, not explosive, not dramatic, but steady, growing, layered with understanding, respect. And somewhere in the middle of that sound, Malik felt something shift, not in the crowd, in himself, because he hadn't spoken to change their minds. He had spoken to remind himself his voice never needed their permission in the first place. When he stepped off the stage, Serena stood to greet him. She didn't hug him. She didn't cry. She just looked him in the eye and said, "You walked through fire and didn't burn. That's your story now." And Julius, he nodded once. You've made peace louder than noise ever could. That night, Malik sat on the fire escape, looking out at the city lights. Kira climbed up beside him, holding a plastic star she'd made in class. She handed it to him. "For your ceiling," she said. He took it gently. "Thanks." She leaned against his side. "You think people change?" He thought for a long time before answering. "I think some do. And the rest, they remember the ones who did." And above them, the night sky stretched wide, endless, silent, and full of stories. By Monday, everything felt different. Not louder, not flashier, just more honest. The hallways of Brentwood High, once filled with shallow greetings and invisible lines, had shifted, and Malik. He wasn't just walking through the space anymore. He was being invited into it, genuinely. In history class, Miss Weaver asked if Malik would help lead a discussion on racial bias in media. In the cafeteria, students moved over to make room at his usual table, not out of pity, but out of quiet recognition. Even the principal, Mr. Harris, who had once met Malik with thin smiles and empty reassurances, stopped him in the hallway to shake his hand. "I heard your words," he said. "They're still ringing." Malik simply nodded. He didn't need to replay it. He'd said what needed to be said, and now he let the words live in others. But not everyone knew what to do with change. Some kids, the ones who had once laughed the loudest, walked the other way when they saw him coming. Some teachers still glanced too quickly at his hoodie before correcting themselves. It wasn't perfect, and Malik didn't expect it to be. Growth doesn't show up in grand apologies. It shows up in hesitation, in redirection, in the way someone checks themselves before speaking. And that was starting to happen. 3 days after the assembly, something unexpected arrived in Malik's inbox. An email from a local education nonprofit. Subject line, "We heard your voice." They had seen a video recording of the assembly. Someone had posted it online. Within 48 hours, it had been shared over 20,000 times. The message was simple. "We'd like you to speak at our youth conference next month. Theme stories that heal." Malik stared at the screen, not out of shock, but out of realization. His voice had left the room. It had crossed walls, and now it was knocking on new ones. He didn't reply right away. He needed time. Not because he was scared, because he was careful now with what he gave his energy to. Not every stage was worth standing on. Not every audience was ready to listen. But some were. And when he closed his laptop, he knew this one might be. Later that day, he walked past a group of freshmen sitting in a circle near the library. One of them, a black boy with tight curls and a backpack too big for his body, looked up as Malik passed and smiled. Not with awe, with solidarity. Malik gave a slight nod back. That was enough. He didn't need to be a hero. He just needed to be visible. Because for some kids, visibility is salvation. That evening, Serena made her famous lemon chicken a small celebration. Even though no one called it that, Julius offered to iron Malik's shirt for the conference. Kira drew a new sign for his bedroom door that said, "Malik's voice lives here." And when they sat down to eat, no one mentioned the past few months. They didn't have to. They talked about constellations, about college tours, about how Malik might mentor younger students next year. Life didn't go back to normal. It evolved into something better, not because the pain had vanished, but because they had walked through it together and turned it into something living. After dinner, Malik stepped outside onto the fire escape. Hoodie on, laptop in hand, he opened a new document, the title, "Things I Wish They'd Taught in School." It wasn't for a class. It wasn't for a competition. It was for the next kid, the next Malik, the one who might one day sit alone, wondering if they were crazy for feeling what they felt. He typed, "You're not too sensitive. You're just surrounded by people who got too good at being numb." He didn't stop there. The words came freely now, and with every sentence, he built a lighthouse, not to shine on himself, but to guide others home. Because that's the lesson no one teaches. Sometimes your pain becomes your platform. Sometimes your silence becomes someone else's survival guide. And sometimes, just by existing out loud, you give someone permission to breathe again. By the end of the week, the hallway outside Malik's English class had changed. Not physically, but something in the air felt different. It wasn't just what Malik said on stage, it was what happened after. Who stayed to listen? Who started speaking up? That's the funny thing about truth. Once it's said out loud, really out loud, it echoes, even in places you didn't expect. The school newsletter ran a short piece titled, "More Than a Hoodie, Malik Rhodes Reframes the Narrative." The student-run podcast requested an interview. The local paper sent a reporter to ask about teen advocacy, and the principal he offered to start a student council initiative on inclusion and asked Malik to consider being a founding voice. Malik read the flyer, folded it, then tucked it into his hoodie pocket, not because he needed the recognition, but because he understood now visibility wasn't vanity, it was responsibility. Still, Malik wrestled with something. At lunch, a sophomore girl named Rena Brown-Skin, braces, quiet as a breeze, stopped him outside the cafeteria. "Can I say something?" she asked, shy but steady. "Sure, you don't know me," she said, "but when you spoke last week, it felt like you were talking for people like me, too." Malik nodded slowly. "People like you." She looked down at her shoes. People who've never been called anything ugly, but still never get called enough to matter. That landed hard, because Malik knew that silence too. The kind that isn't violent, just invisible. "I see you," he said, and she smiled like those 3 words were the warmest thing she'd heard all semester. That night, Malik lay on his bed, arms folded behind his head, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars Kira had taped to his ceiling. He thought about everything, not just the hate, but what came after, the silence, the shift, the space. He realized people weren't looking at him because they were scared anymore. They were looking because they didn't know what came next. And in their eyes, maybe he was the answer, not the only one, but a beginning. The youth conference arrived sooner than expected. A downtown auditorium, rows of folding chairs, microphones taller than Malik was used to. The night before, Serena helped him pack. Julius ironed his shirt again without being asked. Kira slipped a folded note into his jacket pocket that just said, "Be loud. The sky's listening." Backstage, Malik paced slowly. He wasn't nervous. Not exactly. He was aware that this was bigger than a school hallway, bigger than Brentwood. This was about kids in places where the lockers still had slurs scratched into them, where the teachers still said calm down when they meant stay small, where the hoodie still meant threat instead of comfort. The host tapped his shoulder. "You're up next." Malik took one last breath, then stepped onto the stage. He didn't read from a script this time. No folded paper, no podium, just him, a mic, and a crowd full of eyes waiting for truth. "My name is Malik Rhodes," he began, "and I used to think my story wasn't worth telling unless it ended in triumph." A pause. "But I've learned some stories matter just because they're told at all." He scanned the audience. "I'm not a hero. I'm not perfect. I didn't plan to be anyone's lesson," another beat, "but I refuse to be anyone's warning sign either." Heads nodded, eyes softened. Some kids leaned forward. "I wore a hoodie. I got profiled. I got mocked. And I didn't fight back the way they expected. I fought by surviving, by speaking, by not letting them teach me to hate myself in return." He let the silence settle, then finished. "Some people will call that bravery, but to me, that's just breathing in a world that keeps trying to choke you." The room stood, all of it, not for drama, for recognition. And Malik stood in the middle of it, not above them, among them, exactly where he belonged. That night, after the applause, Malik sat on the edge of his bed, still in his conference clothes. He pulled out Kira's note again. Be loud. The sky's listening. He smiled and whispered into the quiet, I hear you. The rain came slow that morning, not a storm, just a soft drizzle, the kind that painted the sidewalk silver and made everything feel quieter than it really was. Malik stood by the window, hoodie already on, hands in his pockets, watching the droplets race each other down the glass. Brentwood looked the same, but Malik had changed, not into someone else, just more himself. He slung his backpack over one shoulder, slipped on his sneakers, and headed out the door. Serena was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, her laptop open, but her eyes on him. You walking today, she asked. He nodded. I like the rain. Julius folded his newspaper. You want me to drive you? Malik shook his head. Nah, I'm good. Kira peeked out from behind her cereal bowl, grinning. Don't forget your space, she said, tapping her wrist where the bracelet still lived. Malik smiled. Always got it. The walk to school was quiet. Brentwood's sidewalks were lined with trimmed hedges and mailboxes that hadn't seen a notice in years. A passing car slowed as it neared him instinctively. The driver looked, then kept moving. Malik didn't flinch, didn't lower his hood. He wasn't shrinking anymore. He was standing, even while walking. At the school gate, a janitor was wiping down the main entrance glass. He looked up, gave Malik a nod. Morning, young brother. Malik returned it. Morning. It was small, but it landed. Inside, the halls buzzed with the low thrum of early classes, locker doors banging shut, and sneakers squeaking on tile. Malik walked past the spot where the first flyer had been taped. Now there was a poster, Equity and Expression Week, Voices That Matter. He didn't stop to read it. He didn't need to. He already knew his voice mattered. In English, Mrs. Rayburn handed back the essays from last week. Malik's had a sticky note on top. In blue ink, she had written, this doesn't just belong in a classroom, it belongs in the world. He folded the paper slowly, not with pride, with care, because when you've had your voice stolen, every word you reclaim feels sacred. At lunch, he sat with a few classmates, not friends yet, but maybe getting there. They didn't talk about justice or identity or trauma. They talked about music, shoes, whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and somehow that felt like its own kind of healing, being allowed to just be. As the afternoon passed, Malik caught sight of Grant once slipping into the counselor's office. Head low, hoodie up, no eye contact, no words, just a shadow of who he used to be. Malik didn't feel triumph, just a understanding. Some people fall to rise, some fall to learn, and some fall just to fall. But that wasn't Malik's job to sort out. Not anymore. By the time the final bell rang, the rain had stopped. The sky was smeared with streaks of pale gold and blue-gray clouds, the kind that always came after a long cleansing. Malik walked out the front doors and paused, just for a moment, not to pose, not to perform, just to breathe. Behind him, the school stood still. Before him, the sidewalk stretched wide. He adjusted his hoodie, not to hide, to honor. Every step he took was quiet, but meaningful. He passed a row of cars. A teacher nodded at him from the driver's seat. He passed the park. A mother pushed her stroller, glanced his way, then looked again, not in fear, but recognition. He passed a brick wall. Someone had spray-painted 3 words in clean, black letters. Let him speak. No name, no credit. Just truth, left behind like a trail marker for the next kid. Malik kept walking, head high, hoodie up. And though he didn't look back, the story did. Every building, every locker, Every teacher who once said nothing, every student who once laughed too loud, they watched, because the boy in the hoodie hadn't just survived. He had become something bigger than what they tried to shrink him into. Not a symbol, not a savior, just a presence, a reminder that silence can be broken, that dignity walks even when it's quiet, even when it's alone. That evening, the city exhaled. The sky over Brentwood was a soft, bruised purple. Clouds stretched thin across fading gold. The kind of sky that made you quiet, whether you meant to be or not. Malik Rhodes sat on the rooftop of his apartment building, hoodie up, elbows resting on his knees, eyes tracking the movement of the world below. A bus pulled away from the curb. A man walked his dog across the street. Children screamed laughter in a game of sidewalk tag. Life moved on. But Malik, he paused, not because he didn't want to move, but because for the first time in months, stillness felt safe. Beside him, his worn-out black notebook lay open. Half of its pages were filled with scribbles, thoughts, one-liners, poems, essay drafts, quotes from his mom, and a few lyrics he never had the courage to turn into songs. At the top of one page, dated from weeks ago, he had written, "Don't forget what they did." Below it, now freshly inked, "And don't forget who you became because of it." He ran his finger along the margin, where Kira had drawn a tiny astronaut with a hoodie and a star in its hand. She had called it Future Malik. He smiled softly. The rooftop door creaked open. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew the rhythm of those steps. Serena. She stepped up beside him, hoodie over her shoulders, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. "Jasmine," she said, handing one to him. "You need it more than me." Malik took the mug, let the steam hit his face. The scent calmed him in ways he couldn't explain. "Thought you might want company," she added, settling beside him. "I don't mind the quiet," he said. "I didn't come to talk." She smiled. "Just to sit." And so they sat, a mother and son on a rooftop, in a city that had once tried to silence him, now listening. After a while, she asked, almost as if testing the air, "You scared of what comes next?" Malik didn't answer right away. He looked out again past the buildings, past the mural on the brick wall down the block, the one painted just days ago, a group of faceless figures standing shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, all in hoodies. Above them, 3 words: seen, heard, hear, know. He said finally, "I'm not scared." She looked over. "I think you're ready." He nodded. "But it's not about being ready. It's about showing up anyway." The door opened again, heavy this time. Julia stepped out, holding a folded newspaper and a small flashlight. "You're gonna go blind out here reading in the dark," he muttered. "Better than listening to cable news." Serena teased. Julia smirked and sat beside Malik, wordless for a minute, then said, "Back in my day, we had to yell just to be heard. Still got drowned out." Malik sipped his tea, waited. "But you," Julia said, looking directly at him. "You didn't yell. You didn't beg. You just stood your ground, and they came to you." He paused. "You taught them how to listen without demanding it." Malik felt that, not as a compliment, as a handoff, a passing of something larger, responsibility, legacy. Julius pulled something from his pocket, a patch, frayed at the edges, military issue. Malik stared at it. "You earned this more than I ever did," Julius said, voice steady. "It's yours." Malik didn't know what to say, so he took it without words. Sometimes, respect isn't loud. It's passed, hand to hand, father to son. Later, when they all went back inside, Malik stopped at the window by the staircase, looked down, watched the people on the street, watched the light reflect off the mural, watched a young black boy in a red hoodie ride by on a skateboard, his laughter echoing off brick walls. And for a moment, Malik saw himself again, not as who he was, but as who he could have been if no one had ever tried to strip him down. But maybe he was still becoming that boy. Only now, with armor made of memory and a voice that no one could take. Back in his room, Malik placed the notebook on his shelf, next to Kira's astronaut drawing and the small astronaut figurine she'd given him months ago. He opened his laptop, typed one sentence in a blank document. "I didn't ask to be followed, but I did choose to lead." Then he closed it, turned off the lights, and let the stars above his bed, the glow-in-the-dark ones Kira had stuck up there, bathe the ceiling in constellations. Each one a step, a word, a wound, a win. He laid back, and for the first time, sleep found him easily. Not because he was tired, but because he was whole. It was Saturday, sky wide open, sun warm, air clean in a way only weekends know how to make it. Malik left the apartment early, hoodie on, headphones over his ears, hands deep in his pockets. No destination, just a walk, just the rhythm of sneakers on sidewalk, the occasional nod from someone passing by, the city humming low and alive all around him. And for once, Malik didn't feel watched. He felt present, rooted, like he finally belonged, not because he had changed, but because he had stayed true while the world learned how to adjust around him. He passed the corner store where a year ago the owner used to keep a suspicious eye on him. Now, the man stepped out, waved, offered him a free bottle of water. Malik took it, nodded. No hard feelings, just growth. He walked past the park, the same one where, months ago, two cops slowed their patrol car when they saw him sitting alone on a bench in a hoodie. Now, two kids played tag in hoodies just like his bright colors, zipped up high, and their mother didn't look twice. That, to Malik, was change, not loud, but real. He reached the mural wall by the alley behind his school, the one with the words seen, heard, here. A new addition had been painted on the lower edge. Just two words, barely noticeable unless you looked walk on. He stared at it for a long moment, then smiled, not for the artist, for the echo of his steps, his voice, his hoodie, still moving long after the noise faded. A block later, his phone buzzed, a text from Rena, the quiet sophomore I just signed up to speak next month. "You were right. They're listening now." He typed back, "They were always capable. They just needed someone to go first." He hit send, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and kept walking. A car pulled up at the stoplight beside him. A teenage boy sat in the passenger seat, maybe 14, black, head low. Their eyes met. "Just a second." The boy nodded. Malik nodded back. That was it. But that moment would stay with both of them. Because sometimes, seeing someone who made it through and didn't fold is enough to remind you that you can, too. He stopped at the corner where the church steps rose high above the street. He climbed them, not to pray, just to sit, to watch the city which stretched wide around him. The wind picked up. He pulled his hood a little tighter. A couple walked by, pushing a stroller. The woman looked at him, smiled, not nervously, genuinely, because Malik was no longer a warning. He was a boy in a hoodie on a Saturday morning, and that was enough. Back home, Kira was building a cardboard rocket ship in the living room. She looked up when he entered. "Malik, where'd you go?" "Nowhere." "Everywhere." "That's confusing." He laughed. "You'll get it one day." She grinned and held up a sheet of stickers. "Help me decorate. You're good with stars." He knelt beside her, peeling back a silver moon. "I've been looking at them long enough." They worked in silence, side by side, hands busy, minds calm. When they finished, She placed the rocket in the window so it could launch properly, and Malik, he stood back and let it shine. That night, as he lay in bed, stars glowing above, he wrote one last entry in his notebook. I didn't win anything. There's no trophy, no parade, no perfect ending, but I got to walk through all of it, and I'm still here. That's enough. He closed the notebook, placed it on the shelf, right between the patch his father gave him and Kira's future Malik astronaut. The next morning, he would wake up and do what he always did, brush his teeth, pull on his hoodie, step into the world, not because he was trying to prove something, but because he could. And because now every step he took was history in motion. Every sidewalk knew the story. Every street remembered the silence that used to follow him. Now it followed someone else, or no one at all. And that, perhaps, was the quietest victory of all. He didn't need to say goodbye, because the story was still being written, not just by him, but by every kid with a hoodie, a voice, and the courage to walk on anyway. Some stories don't end with a bang. They don't ride off into the sunset or close with thunderous applause. Some stories just keep walking. Like Malik, no medals, no headlines, no viral moment to seal the victory, just a boy in a hoodie, still standing, still breathing, still choosing dignity over rage, silence over spectacle, and truth over performance. And that's power, not the loud kind, the lasting kind. Because what Malik showed us is simple. You don't need to change the world all at once. Sometimes, changing how the world sees you is enough to start the ripple. So if you've ever been overlooked, misjudged, silenced, remember this. You don't have to shout. You don't have to fight fire with fire. You just have to keep walking. Keep walking until your silence becomes a message, until your hoodie becomes a banner, until your name is no longer a question but an answer. And to every kid out there who feels invisible, we see you, we hear you, you are here. If this story moved you, don't walk away quietly. Subscribe to Silent Power Stories. Share this with someone who needs it. Turn on the bell so you never miss a story that speaks where the world stays silent. Tell us in the comments, what does your hoodie mean to you? We're listening, always.